Once upon a time there was a pair of matching antique chairs, and they'd been a splendidly grand pairing in their day, framing the entrance hall of a 5-star chateau in France, no less. With their pristine upholstery and gleaming gilded feet, they proudly stood, sentry-like, on either side of the most awe-inspiring and gravity-defying floral displays, and many a guest would rest their tourist-tired limbs from yet another vineyard visit, draping themselves with an elegance that the chairs relished, whilst their loved one would finally finish in the bathroom. But those days had long gone, because over many years, through a series of bankruptcies and country house sales and market square auctions and several trips wrapped in old blankets in the back of a workman's van, they now found themselves on display in the window of a converted barn store in a small village in England, with a shabby chic label and a vulgar price tag to match. Who on earth would pay such a price for us in this condition, they wondered. And it was shameful, like being presented to the Pope in your old pyjamas, or going on a first date with the very worst cold sores eating up your top lip. But purchased at full price they were, by a bonny young girl who fell in love with them as she drove past one day. They were perfect in her eyes, as she was looking for something to make her clients feel different and distracted, and very special indeed as they waited at her clinic. Because her clients were all very sick, you see, so sick that all they'd had to look at in the last few months, perhaps even years, were clinical walls and drips, and all they'd been able to think about was whether all the medical paraphernalia would work in their cases. Lifesavers' medical magic bullets and gizmos can certainly be, but in the case of all the bonny young girls' clients, sadly, they hadn't been. But it so happened that the bonny young girl knew an awful lot about life-saving. You see, she was married to a life-saver, a marvellous hunk of a man she'd met at the local ball 3 years before, who by day farmed pigs and muck-shifted, but by night he revived discarded beams or long-dead tree stumps into new archways or even doors, and arms and legs for flailing disabled furniture. He'd also made their marriage bed. He started the night he met her by restoring a couple of old railway sleepers. Sometimes she said she could hear a hoot and a whistle when he went like a train. With hands that were calloused from hauling pig carcasses daily, over months he'd lovingly carved a delicate swooping dragonfly into the headboard of their bed, and often they would both hang on to its wings. When the lifesaver man saw the pair of antique chairs his bonny girl had bought, he let out one of his hoots. You darling! For he knew the love with which his girl had bought them, not just for him, but for so many. And she'd also removed the price tag, and she was very good at distraction tactics. That night he took that love, their love, and his love for workmanship and restoration, and magnified it as much as he could, and stitched it deep down into the very core of the first of the chairs. He riveted in love right around the seat, locking in the softest deep pearl velvet that he could find. And he returned the feet from worn thin claws to rounded padding paws. And then, a few nights later, he gilded the first antique chair from head to toe, a messy job that needed two, so he and his girl shared a bottle of golden bubbles in the draughty barn studio as they got a bit gilded themselves, stopping occasionally for the odd chink of glasses and lips and hips along the way. That was the deal. He was no idiot. Now, it was nearly Christmas, and the girl had done everything she could to cheer her clinic waiting lounge. Lights and stars and angels twinkled with the hope of heavenly magic in the very darkest time. But somehow it still didn't feel enough. So, She twisted the lifesaver's arm, which he rather liked as it usually meant he could twist hers back, to have the chairs in the clinic early. And he shunted both chairs across the barn to the waiting lounge, one pristine and gleaming, and one still shabby chic and cold-sore scabby, and frankly profoundly embarrassed to be anywhere near its now very far from identical twin. "Oh, what a beauty!" was the favourite exclamation of the day, as patients parcelled in with mince pies and brandy snaps made with the love of a final batch. Tears welled up easily for many of them now, and the life-saving love they saw in the restored chair had them gazing and clasping hands to mouths, and silently wishing for the bonny young girl and her husband a protection that would keep them gilded forever, even if such luck was not to be their own lot. "Sit in me," begged the gilded chair, "please," to all the clients who passed it. It was silently aching to hold and support those so in need of some comfort and rest, but who were now, bizarrely, standing for far too long in reverent respect for its splendour. Sit they would, as if they had heard its cry, but not in it. They would all, without exception, sag into the tired shabbiness of its twin. One by one, in fact everyone, every single one, would in turn turn away from the glorious chair. Yes, they treasured the beauty of the gilded restored chair from afar, there was no doubt of that, but they all relished the comfort of the version that felt far more right to sit in, far more them, and some would even give a little pat to the chair they had chosen to sit in, with a comforting stroke and a whisper, "Your turn next." But somehow the bonny young girl never did push for her lifesaver husband to work his magic on the second chair. Perhaps she'd noticed how no one sat in the gilded one, and she couldn't afford to lose 2 seats on busy clinic days. Or perhaps she realised that in their odd combination the pair of chairs served their best purpose. Or maybe, most likely, she was focused on the crib that the lifesaver was carving now, as he'd worked an entirely different kind of life-giving magic in their lives. He was busy weaving baby dragonflies, dancing a wish of sweet dreams about their soon-to-be firstborn crib's edges. So I am sure that we can forgive her for leaving the other chair behind. Although, from the lonely tone of its story, and the glow of a different kind I felt from its shabby twin, I'm not convinced at all that the gilded antique chair was so at ease about a life of bling.